Our speaker served as a chaplain to public safety agencies with Fremont Fire Department while a priest at St. Joseph Catholic Mission of San Jose. Is that correct, Father? Then in 1999, while at St. Columba, he began to serve the Oakland Fire Department, then to Oakland Police Department as their chaplain, and served there for 13 years. So I got it right. I researched it. And comments that, I mean, he's inspiration to time of crisis. And so who better be able to talk about moments with Christ and speaking like Christ than Father Jayson Landeza.
Great, thank you. I'm going to check the lighting thing, see if we can go ahead and see if we can't enable folks to read a little bit better. I'm not sure how the lighting works. That works. Let's see. Hey.
No sleeping.
Well, you can sleep all you want. It's no snoring is what the, after a wonderful meal, you gotta tell me.
This way, brother. Somewhere.
How's that? Is that a little better?
Yeah.
Probably it's my eyesight that can't see very well. So, well, first of all, my Auntie Faye, for quite a number of months, has been inviting me to come join you folks, and for whatever reason, because I've been through a number of transitions, I've been able to do that a little bit. Can you read that okay? No, I didn't think so.
Born and raised in worship.
No, I feel like I'm showing you guys an eye chart.
I'm showing you someone.
Let's see. A little fuzzy, isn't it?
I could read it for you.
Yeah, it's clear.
That's clear?
It's clear. I have 4 eyes, that's why.
Well, that's good. There?
A little bit earlier.
Boy, you folks have way better eyesight than I do. I think that's blurry, isn't it? So, well, I'll just read it anyway. So I was born and raised in Berkeley. My parents were born and raised in the islands in Hawaii. My father is ethnically Filipino. His father and his grandparents are from the Philippines. My mother is Chinese, Hawaiian, and Irish of ethnicity. I was ordained a priest for the Diocese of Oakland at the Cathedral in 1987. I've been assigned to a variety of different parishes throughout the diocese, beginning with St. Leander, San Leandro, St. Joseph's Mission, San Jose, and Fremont, St. John Vianney, Walnut Creek. I was the pastor of St. Columba Church in Oakland, which is the diocese's largest African-American parish. I was pastor there for 10 years. During the middle of that period of time, there was a crisis at St. Joseph's the Worker in Berkeley. So I took over that parish for about 2 years, as well as running St. Columba in Oakland. Went on a year sabbatical that took me all over the world, particularly to the Vatican, and then was assigned to St. Leander, San Leandro as the associate, and St. Joan of Arc as recently as about a few weeks ago as their associate. Bishop Barber appointed me as the full-time chaplain for law enforcement agencies throughout Alameda County, specifically for the Oakland Police Department. I had been doing that for part-time for quite a number of years, and am now doing that full-time and living at St. Leander, San Leandro. My biggest claim to fame is the fact that Faye Quinto is my brother's mother-in-law. That is the proudest part of my life at this very point, is Faye Quinto, my association with Faye Quinto. This is what Pope Benedict said about what faith is. Now, what I want to talk to you tonight about is the personal experience of Jesus and being able to share that experience as a way in which to connect with and take seriously the faith that we embrace. I'm going to talk a little bit about a particular author named Sharon Waddell, who came and spoke with us at the diocese some months ago, and some ways in which we continually have to touch upon our daily experiences, to connect with the person of Jesus in each of our daily lives and each of our everyday experiences and the people whose lives we interact. And those kinds of experiences are more common than you'd believe. And you'd be surprised where you find them. And you know when you do. But what I'm going to do tonight is give you a hand about trying to look at your day and see where you interacted with Christ. So Pope Benedict XVI, he had a general audience at St. Peter's Square and said this on October 21st, 2009. Faith is above all a personal, intimate encounter with Jesus and to experience his closeness, his friendship, his love. And only in this way does one learn to know him evermore and to love and follow him evermore. May this happen to each and every one of us. And I'd say, may it happen to each and every one of us a lot. And it happens more often than you think. Sherry Waddell is an author. She worked with the Archdiocese of Seattle. Bishop Barber had her come out here some months ago to speak to all the priests of the diocese in one evening at St. Mary's Cathedral, St. Mary's Parish in Walnut Creek, and for an entire day with the catechists, the religious educators, and the youth ministers of the diocese. And that's the session that I attended when she came here. What she's finding is that in so many ways, we as Catholics are Catholics. But I'll try to show some people. I know people are having a difficult time seeing this, but the intent is, in her work, is that in order for us to continue to build the kingdom of God, we've got to not only get a sense of what our experience of Christ is, but perhaps even more importantly, to share that experience of Christ. The personal witness of Christ touching your heart and your life. And being able to hear others speak about that same experience, that you're not the only ones who have that kind of experience. And yet that's a language that we as Catholics are not accustomed to speaking on not only on a shared level, but even on a more open level. These are figures that come from her book, and I think they're worth looking at because it bespeaks of the kinds of ways in which we as Catholics struggle with what it means to share our own faith. That only 30% of Americans who are raised Catholics are still practicing. They say the largest percentage of religious connected people in the country, this was a Pew Gallup survey done, were ex-Catholics. Ex-Catholics outnumber Catholics in the United States. But the majority of adult Catholics are not even certain that a personal relationship with God is possible. Because somehow we are so accustomed to being very cultural about the practice of our Catholicism and are unable to speak of and share that personal experience of how God has touched our lives and all the many ways in which God has walked with us each and every day. So transmitting the faith means to create in every place and time the conditions for the personal encounter of individuals with Jesus Christ. How do we interact and touch upon that experience, that person? At the faith encounter with the person of Jesus Christ in relationship with him, remembering him in the Eucharist, and through the grace of the Spirit, having us in the mind of Christ. So not only getting a sense of what Christ is for us in our own lives, but getting a sense of what getting into our own mind what it is that Christ wants for us. So she uses this word intentional discipleship, as opposed to cultural discipleship, which is sort of like, well, we're going to do it because my mom did it, my grandparents did it. We do it because that's the way my people did it. Intentional discipleship means that there's a conscious decision upon each and every one of us to say, I'm in this, not because my parents did this and my grandparents did this. I'm in it because I intentionally say yes to Christ in my own life, because I experience him, I know him, I see him, he's in my heart, he's in my life, he's in my experience. That's the intentionality with which she uses the word intentional discipleship. So the intentional discipleship is not accidental or merely cultural. It's not a matter of just following the rules. A disciple's primary motivation comes from within, out of a Holy Spirit given a hunger and thirst for righteousness. That all things serve and from all the central thing, the worship and love of the Blessed Trinity with one's whole heart, soul, mind, and strength, and therefore the love of neighbor as well. Evangelization isn't about us. It's about Jesus. It's about making him known. It's about making his experience in your life known and shared. It means seeking out those lost sheep through us. And in any of our parishes, you know what it's like. You know people who just go to Mass for the sake of, well, they're there, but they're not engaged in their faith. they're there at 7 o'clock in the morning, they're looking at their watch because I see them. I'm preaching. I'm looking at them, look at their watch. I know they got a tea time coming up. I know they got something coming up. And I know they're just doing it because they're just going through the motions. You know, we all know folks like that. We're not putting them down, but it's just sense that somehow faith has got to be something deeper. We're just talking at the table about how she was looking for a place. You could be involved in all kinds of ministries in the parish, but sometimes there's got to be a point where some people are looking for something deeper, and being able to share the path and journey of faith and how Christ has walked with you in your life. Sometimes we're uncomfortable as Catholics to share that, and when we meet a group of folks like in a Cursillo setting who are more than able and willing to want to share that, then there's this connection, there's this fellowship, there's this friendship, there's this joy, there's this trust, and all you that we talked about, that's part of your own faith experience that has now been deepened. So this is what she's talking about, that if you can light this fire through a parish, let alone through like a Cursillo movement, because all of us who've been through Cursillos have walked out of there transformed. It's keeping that fire going. It's being able to connect with other people who have that shared faith that's going to sustain that faith in our own Christian journey as we travel along in this path. We as Catholics have this don't ask, don't tell attitude about our faith, right? I mean, sometimes, and that's what Sherry Waddell talks about. It's like this sort of sense that, you know, we won't ask you about whether you encountered God today, and we really don't want to have you share with us that, because that's maybe just too personal, and I've got a golf date I got to go to. I ain't got time to listen. So you know that in many of our parishes, that can end up being the normative for faith sharing. There isn't any. So you don't ask, geez, how did you encounter Christ today? What was it about today that made a difference for you? Where was God with you today? So sometimes in our own Catholic journey, we have a don't ask, don't tell. Sometimes we are invited in a particular way, our faith tells us to ask, and then maybe we'll tell you where we saw Christ. Sherry Waddell talks about this spiral of silence, and it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, that it's essential for us to grasp that the cultural pressure, both inside and outside the average American parish, is often against the overt expression of discipleship. Now, what we do here at Cursillo, at our leaders, is that sometimes it runs counter to what our faith, it runs counter to what we're accustomed to doing, sharing some of those deepest parts of our own lives. Because we're afraid people might think, man, this person's like really in the religious thing or whatever. We risk the judgment that people can often throw at us, when in fact we're sharing what the person of Christ and what God has done for us in our life. There's two overlapping cultural norms that are a part of all this. Is one secular and the other ecclesial. It's intimidating for men and women to seek imitating men and women who seek to live as Christ, disciples of Jesus Christ. In order to counter that pressure to live loud as the intention of Catholics were called to be, we absolutely need strong interpersonal communal support. Which is what you're doing here. Which is what this is all about. You're relying on each other for that faith and that support to sustain you, to go against a pressure within the church and perhaps beyond that says we don't share things as deep as it is as faith to us. So this is exactly what we're doing here as we go ahead and get a sense of sharing our faith in the context of the Filipino community, Cursillo, and the diocese. That we need the strong interpersonal communal support that this group provides as well. Where do you find Christ? Where do you find Christ? Just say it out loud. Where do you find Christ?
Here.
You know, but there's the funny thing too, that one of the things that sustained me at St. Columba. St. Columba is at the corner of Alcatraz and San Pablo in North Oakland. And Alcatraz and San Pablo is perhaps one of the most heavily, let's put it this way, whenever I would open the church in the morning, particularly on Sunday mornings, I would have to clear the steps and the surrounding areas of used condoms, of waste matter, all kind of needles. We would have in our rectory a mug full of bullet casings. It's at the corner of Alcatraz and San Pablo is one of the most heavily prostituted areas in the city of Oakland. Drug deals and all, at least once a year someone would be shot and killed in front of the church. Not just shot, I mean people get shot maybe once a month around the church, shot and killed once a year in front of the church. So it was not unusual in the context of the work I did in the inner city of Oakland to encounter all kinds of characters. And you know, in encountering some of those characters, I found Christ. I would see Christ. And I would be humbled and surprised where I would find Christ. So when you've got a reading like we do from Matthew 25, which says to us, "Come, you that are blessed by my Father," you can see, "they had prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me." So we find Christ in all kinds of different settings in the context of our own lives, but we find Christ in a particular way in the kinds of people that I encountered at St. Columba. When I arrived at St. Leander 2 weeks ago, I was informed by Father Paul Vassar, who's the pastor, that they have a program, not really a program, but every Monday night, the church is kept open all night long for homeless people. I'm like, man, wow, that's... So, I mean, tonight, I may just go on by. I mean, my auntie face says, "Oh yeah, your brother's going to be playing basketball across the street." And it's going to be ironic that as he plays basketball, the church will start filling up with homeless people who don't have a place to stay. So, and that's the sense of this parish's desire, to seek Christ, even the folks who have no place to call home. Think about where you saw Christ these past few days. Think about in your own life. Maybe just think for a little bit about where you encountered Christ. Sometimes you're surprised because you know doggone well Christ put somebody in your own life and it makes you shake your head and say, "Man, I would not have expected Christ to be there." On the left-hand side, anyone, any idea where that's at?
Bingo.
Bingo? No, there's not bingo here. Maybe where that is?
The church.
No, well, Holy Sepulchre Cemetery, Hayward. Anyone been there? Holy Sepulchre Cemetery? That's the mausoleum. The mausoleum. Been there. So I had a generally do a lot of services there, and so the mortuary, the Holy Angels and Holy Sepulchre called me to go ahead and work with a 92-year-old man who had lost his 90-year-old wife. They'd been married for about 64 years. And like I said, I've been a priest for 27 years. I've done a few hundred funerals, maybe more than that. So I went to this fellow's house. He lived in South Hayward. And I think the moment I walked in the door, I knew something was different. He was in his wheelchair. It was a very simple home, very, very simple home. Remember, I spent the last year in San Ramon and Danville. So, you know, I walked in this house and he said, "Come please sit in my chair." Now I know his chair, I knew it was his favorite chair because he'd been in that chair. I mean, he'd been in that chair. Let's put it that way, okay? And so I'm like, he wants me to sit here and I really don't want to sit there so I could see what's kind of been there. And I'm being respectful, right? But I just knew that this is like, whoa, this is going to be okay, fine. And you know, and of course his chair was wet, which was like, you know, so. But he talked about a love he had for his wife. That, you know, I just sat in his wheelchair and he was hard of hearing, but here he was torn apart about having loved this woman for 64 years, and the pain, the deep visceral pain that caused him. The joy that he talked about when he talked about his wife and how they first met and how he was being shipped off to the Pacific Theater in the Second World War. Talked about how they got married after the war and how they bought their home and raised a family. And then he talked about having lost 2 of his children, his only 2 children in the world. And one died of cancer at 10 years old. The other died of AIDS some years later. And he talks about losing his life, his wife. And then you hear him talk about, "I'm the only one left. I'm all alone." And you sit there thinking, man, this is Christ. I mean, you sit there thinking, this is the encounter of Christ. This is the encounter with Christ. This is the things you sit there and say, now you don't know what it is. And it comes on you surprisingly. All of us have those experiences, that you know you're sitting in the presence of something sacred right at that very moment. And it's about about his fragility, his aloneness, that this is the person of Christ in our midst. So you couldn't help but think that. Married his wife, I thought about him. Here he was, this forlorn character. That was the Christ that I encountered. That's a few days, this was on Saturday. This is yesterday. Oh no, this was, well, okay, the setting here is Mercy Retirement Care Facility and Home in Oakland, off of 35th at Foothill. Some of you know that facility. That's a wonderful facility. My mother suffered a very serious stroke about a month and a half ago. She, age of 74 years old, my mother worked full-time at the Chancery, the Roman Catholic Diocese of Oakland Central Services Office. She worked there for many, many years. She was getting up to go to work from Berkeley into downtown Oakland, as she generally does, and got out of bed and suffered a very severe stroke, which left her her left arm and left leg debilitated, as well as leaving her partially blind. She is living with my sisters in Pleasant Hill, having moved out of the place in Berkeley, and we're looking at different places for her to stay. We took her to her Mercy Center yesterday, Mercy Retirement Center. She wanted to go to a place where she could have Mass every day and Rosary every day. My mother had been going to Mass every day since she came here from Hawaii back in 1957. So we went to Mercy Center, and on the floor that my mother, we're looking at the apartment for my mother, on the floor that she will possibly live on, much to my surprise, are two old priest friends who I've known for many, many years. And so we were wheeling my mother in a wheelchair, and I saw these two names on the doors. I said, "You gotta be kidding me." And so I knocked on these doors, and they're popping out. So, "Hey, Jason, hey, Barry, hey, Jason, hey, Louie, what's going on, man?" And my mother's kind of looking like, what is going on here? And for me, it was and I hadn't seen those guys in years, but these are people I used to work with. But I remember at the end, as I was running back to St. Leander, because the bishop was coming over for confirmation, I thought to myself, that's again one of those experiences of Christ that you don't expect. It's one of these experiences that touch you, and maybe there's a message behind that. The message behind that for me was, yeah, Mama's going to be at this place because she's surrounded by priests. I mean, yeah. So that was one of those things that you say, okay, God, thank you. Or God, thank you for at least somehow trying to comfort this guy in the midst of his own kind of struggle of loss. So the experience of Christ, as we can all recognize, comes to us as a surprise oftentimes, comes to us unexpectedly, comes to us in the least likely moment, but it comes to us. And the important thing is to acknowledge that. If you don't share it with somebody else, write it down, do something to allow that experience to live, because that's the lived experience of Christ in our lives as well too. Father James Martin is a Jesuit priest. The Jesuits have a real good way. That's why, by the grace of God, we have a Jesuit Pope and a Jesuit Bishop, because there's a deep, profound sense of spirituality that they embrace that invites us to try to see God in all things and the presence of Christ in all the interactions and experience that characterize our faith journey. Father James Martin has a kind of a daily examen that he invites people to ponder and pray over at the end of the day. And again, remember, he begins as a fivefold examen process. So I just thought I'd just kind of share that with you as we wind down a little bit. Remember that you're in the presence of Christ in a special way when you pray. Ask Jesus for help in your own prayer. It's like a great common sense. This is the one I love, because this is the one where we begin to really see Christ in our daily lives. Recall 2 or 3 things that happened today for which you are especially grateful. Savor them. Thank Jesus for these gifts. Something like that happened to me at of all places, Harry's Hofbrau. This afternoon. Harry's Hofbrau, San Leandro, off 150th. 120. I try to get these.
I've been there many times.
Oh yeah, you can around the hospital's on the corner, right?
Yes.
Harry's Hofbrau, typical old style Hofbrau place, right? So I'm also a chaplain for the Alameda County Sheriff's Department. So a bunch of us were gathered for lunch that day. And one of the gathered there, today, it was after this afternoon, someone who was gathered there was someone I knew who was evangelical Protestant. He is the chaplain, one of the chaplains for the East Bay Regional Parks District. So he asked me, so we're talking about St. Leander for whatever reason. Then he goes, my father goes to St. Leander. Of course, I'm shocked because the guy's an evangelical pastor, right? He goes, my father goes to St. Leander. It's like, oh, really? 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 Then he goes, oh, my father opens the church up every morning. Oh, really? Which means I should know this guy, right? And I, you know, because I'm a really smart guy, I connect that. Okay, his last name is Guest. The guy who opens the church at St. Leander, his last name is Guest. I said, is your father's name Ron? And he goes, yes, that's my father who opens the door at St. Leander every morning. And I remember being both becoming excited, disappointed, you know, wondering what happened in the context of this guy's life that he left St. Leander Church and became evangelical Protestant. Then I remembered, because Ron had mentioned to me a few days ago that his daughter had died in a tragic accident on the Stanislaus River back in 1982. And then it dawned in my own mind, wow, maybe that was the conversion experience that he must have needed, my friend, who was the chaplain, that maybe drew him away from the Catholic Church and found something else. And that's another whole argument altogether. But it was nonetheless a moment of Christ, because there, you know, I was able to get a sense of this person's faith struggle, the connection to the Catholic Church that he had, and the fact that his father opens up St. Leander every morning, and here's someone I've known for about 4 years, and I would have never known that. But again, some of the things that some of the places you experience the sacred moment could even be as benign as the Harry's Hofbrau over a turkey leg with lots of gravy. Recall some of those things that have happened today, which you're especially grateful for God's presence. Renew your day from start to finish, noticing where you experience the Lord's presence. Notice everything from large things to small things, things that are enjoyable in interaction with a friend, to the feel of the sun on your face. Or for those of us in San Leandro, the wind at your back. You know, for all those hot days you've had all last week, there's something just refreshingly cool about that San Leandro wind that comes sailing through off of Davis Street. Where did you love? Who loved you today? You may have sinned today, or perhaps done something you regret. Express your sorrow to the Lord and ask for forgiveness. If it's a grave sin, pray about seeking forgiveness from the person you've offended, or perhaps experience for yourself the sacrament of reconciliation. You may want to return to a meaningful part of your prayer and speak to the Lord about how you felt. At the close of the prayer, ask for God's grace for the following day. We can always use more grace in our life, particularly if we don't know what's going on the next day. The Lord knows all kinds of stuff happened that next day. We don't know about. So Father James Martin concludes by saying, over time, as you pray this examen, you'll notice God's presence in the moment. As I mentioned earlier, you'll become more aware of, like, whoa, this is where God is right now. Or, whoa, this is a special moment that can only be attributed to the grace of God. Either you can see that just at the end of the day, or perhaps you'll see that in its present moment. You'll see the whole day, your whole day becomes kind of a prayer. Because what's going to happen is your whole day is going to be attuned to the awareness of the sacred. Your whole day is going to be attuned to the presence of Christ, the lives you meet. That you'll have your mind open to those experiences. And you know them because you'll feel them and experience them in a profound way. And you will be like, as a Jesuit would say, contemplative in action. I know you can't read these, but I'm a spiritual director. I've had a spiritual director for many, many years. He's a professor at the Jesuit School of Theology in Berkeley. His name is Father George Murphy. At least for 15 years, I've been seeing him on a monthly basis to talk about my own spiritual journey. He asks me to always look at these questions when I go to bed at night. Take a look at a moment to, you know what?
To be
I
aware
can hear
of God's
me okay.
presence over here, but
You can hear me
it's
okay.
clearer.
Take a moment to be aware of God's presence. Look over my day. How am I feeling? What touched my heart? What was important to me? What engaged me? What did I enjoy? Where did I find life? What excited me? What fed me? What discouraged me? What frustrated me? What angered me? Were there any moments where God was particularly close? Ask God to look at my day with me. What was important to God? And can I talk with God about that? I'm always struck by what was important to God. Because what may have been important to me may not have been important to God. And what was important to God may not have been important to me. And my spiritual director always seems to ask that question. What do you think, he would say, what do you think God would have thought about that? And of course, that's when my common sense mind would say, you know, it wouldn't have made a whole lot of difference for God. It was more my ego at work. Now, there's the last part, because I was asked to talk about talking like Christ, and that's, I think people in their own common sense know what talking like Christ is. You mentioned that earlier. It's like, well, you had some anger or some frustrations with that person, but talking like Christ means you're not going to go up to them and make, so that's the common sense of Christ speaking to your own heart, saying, you know what it means to and a lot of it means being humble. A lot of being, just shut your mouth and just be humble about it, okay? Just not say nothing, because that's the way it's supposed to be. So, again, these seem like little common sense things, but they relate back to Scripture and how God invites us in the person of Christ to respond to various situations. Let this humble mind be in you. That was also in Christ Jesus in Philippians. Be prepared to say sorry, of course. Be considerate of all others. Love is always patient and kind. We heard that in 1 Corinthians. And, of course, the voice and tone of language. Speak kindly. My mom always taught me that. Speak kindly. That didn't work very often, but I tried. So, anyway, but, thank you. Any questions? Anyone want to throw something at me?
Turn on the light, please.
Here, turn on the light. Really good concept, by the way. Yes. Question.
Can you see in the future that the Catholic Church the presence would be on TV, talking to millions of people, and be vocal about what they speak about?
I think you've got, first of all, I think you've got a real advocate in Francis. I mean, Francis is doing that. Pope Francis is doing that, and the secular press is picking up on that. I mean, it's worth noting that magazines as varied as Rolling Stone, as Time, as let's see, who else? There are a bunch of other magazines that have featured, extensive articles on the present Pope. Advocate, the nation's largest gay magazine, had an affirming article about the Pope. Vanity Fair had an article about the Pope. So there's a variety of different magazines that have just started. So that's, in some ways, unintentionally, I think, we as a Catholic community are doing that. If we were more organized about that, that would probably be much more effective as the American church. But we're not that coordinated about that, and that's just something that's unfortunate. But I think the Pope is helping us to do that on a much global level, I think.
Is it because of the limitations we are being fenced off? We can do this because we're Catholics.
No,
we're
because,
not,
well,
we're not the same as other religions.
We're, for the most part, whether you believe this or not, for the American Catholic Church, we're fairly decentralized, meaning each diocese has its own kinds of resources, its own kind of material, its own kinds of, so to coordinate those kind of efforts on a national level, various dioceses can probably do that on its own. I mean, if the Diocese of Oakland chose, they can go ahead and buy airtime on KTVU if they chose to do that. They'll probably do that for larger events. But there isn't a coordinated national effort to have that kind of larger, broad evangelical outreach to the larger community representing the Catholic Church and its teachings. We do that on our own. We do that perhaps as parishes in our own individual cities. We might do that as a particular diocese in the geographic area. But as far as doing that on a national level, we're pretty uncoordinated about that. Yes?
Well, I think also what's helping with that too is EWTN, because they are on cable and they are on radio. It's extremely important because there's so much more conversions happening everywhere.
Well, to the extent that they're available in various cable markets, because some markets don't carry EWTN as an option. Like, I don't think you get it in Oakland, but you get it certainly in Hayward. I mean, that comes free to Hayward, San Leandro, Fremont residents get that as part of their package. And yet, you're in Berkeley, you don't get that. So, so, and again, limited coverage. The radio as well, too, because the AM, I believe, is the 1260. I forget what it's and yet, even still, that's limited with regards to the kind of coverage and range it has. So.
Yes, but the good thing though is that at least, they're starting to slowly but surely buy more and more regions, coverage areas. Like they just bought the Los Angeles area.
And that's a major market. That's a major market.
So at least we're getting out there.
One of the things I used to do is I used to represent the priests of the Western U.S. to the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. I did that for 5 years as part of my responsibility. when the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops meet throughout the country, there's a priest from each of the 12 regions of the country that represents the issues of the priests for that region. So for the region of California, Hawaii, and Nevada, for a 5-year period, I represented the priests of this region to the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. So at every meeting where the bishops met, I was able to meet back and report back to the leadership of the priests of this area, kind of what goes on at a national level. So there's kind of awareness about the kind of things that went on at that level. That's interesting. So. Anything else? Any questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, Father. In your presentation, you said, I think 30% of adult Catholics are practicing.
No, this is 30% of those American Catholics are practicing, meaning of the, say as a percentage-wise, 100%, 30 of those would be those who grew up Catholic, 30 of them are continuing to practice their faith, as opposed to 100%.
Right, and the millennials are even worse. It's only 17%.
Right.
What's the church going to do about reversing the trend?
Well, I think it's got to do a number of things. I think it's got to be, you have to have leadership that's going to be able to, again, talk about what the experience of Christ means for them. I don't know how often you hear in your own homilies a priest talking about his personal relationship with Christ and how he encountered Christ in the context of his work or in the context of his life. I don't know. We can talk about how it relates to your experience, to our common experience. How do we see Christ in the everyday? How can we see Christ as he relates to our day-to-day lives? As people living in the San Francisco Bay Area, in the East Bay, in 2014. I mean, and I think there's an ongoing and deep kinds of struggle that's going on in the church right now that has to do with our inability, at some level, to revitalize the local church. I hear so often people in the parishes who are either dissatisfied with that they're not inspired or they're not. I'll just say it. Sometimes I hear parishioners, they don't understand what the priests are saying on a lot of different levels. They don't understand, both unable to speak or unable to, or even understand their language. So I'm going to hear that quite a bit. So people are looking to be fed elsewhere. You see that particularly in the Latino community, where since they don't have a real strong presence of Latino priests, that you have a lot of people going to faith communities that are vibrant, that are exciting, that are being led with powerful preaching, and they're being inspired by that with the music that's enabled them to reconnect to their worship life. So they leave and go elsewhere because they don't feel like they're being fed in the Catholic Church. For a lot of different reasons. Maybe pastors, a lot of our priests are coming in from other countries, and they don't know how to work in a multicultural environment. I mean, we have guys who are coming from India who don't speak Spanish and refuse to speak Spanish, and yet the overwhelming majority of many of our parishes are Spanish speaking. So it's one of those struggles. It's like how, so they're going elsewhere. We see that in the Pew Research studies have shown they're leaving because they're not being fed in the Catholic Church. I was at a meeting with a bunch of Catholic priests a few days ago. They talked about the Spanish-speaking community and why people are leaving. Because a lot of priests are like, well, I'm not going to speak Spanish, so okay, fine then. We're leaving. We're going elsewhere. There's a parish in, I'm going to say where it's at. It's on the other side of the hill, where the Spanish folks are leaving because they're not being affirmed by the priest that's there. They're going, and that priest speaks Spanish. They're going to another parish where the priest doesn't speak Spanish, but he's open to having a Latino presence. Guadalupe, all the different kinds of activities that go around that. Yes, ustedes están bienvenidos por aquí para salvar sus barrios, cosas, no? So that's the struggle. I mean, so we're losing people, and then some people are losing more people than they be living. So we got to do something to revitalize this, because if this is happening, your kids and grandkids, if they're not going to church, or they're going to go somewhere else. Yes.
The Apostolic Exhortation of Pope Francis is a good book.
Excellent book.
Okay?
Excellent.
There's no question about
Excellent.
it. But the question is that how will that be brought up? Actually, how will that be disseminated to the parishes? but is the bishop, if I may say so, are they in obedience to the Pope to begin with? Okay, they seem like it's writing. So actually, with that different belief, I say yes, but actually I do something else in my own belief. Then that's actually a point of consideration. Sure. How effective will that be if you have if I may say, a dysfunctional diocese? If I may just say so, just for argument purpose. Sure. I know you know what I mean. Right. So now, with that being said, so of course, the flock will also be dispersed. So what is it that the hierarchy, or maybe the bishop, that they can be united in this, so that the flock will also be, when the shepherd calls, the flock follows.
So you're. I'm going to be straight up honest with you, since you've asked a very honest question. A good many of the bishops that we have within our world were appointed by either Pope John Paul II or Pope Benedict. Okay. Pope Francis, in many ways, is a very different pope. And so the popes that were appointed under previous pontificates, they maybe perhaps are a bit maybe taken aback by the frankness and the way in which Francis wants to direct the church at this point. That's very clear. I mean, that's an honest assessment of the reality of what's going on. I'm not sure, and I think verbally and publicly, the bishops are going to be in line with what the Pope has to say. But let me give you a good example of where that came to play. It came to play at Lent, at Holy Thursday. On Holy Thursday, there was a diocese in Michigan that sent out an edict, the bishop did, that only men can have their feet washed at Holy Thursday. This is past Holy Thursday. The Pope washed the feet of non-Catholic women at Holy Thursday. So that's what's happening more and more in the church, is that you've got the Pope who's doing one thing, and you've got bishops who were appointed under a previous realm who are saying, no, we're going to do this. Now, I don't know how that conflict can somehow come to some kind of boiling point, but the seeds for that kind of conflict are there already because of what you experience on something as seemingly benign as Holy Thursday. And this is the second Holy Thursday that the Pope included women and non-Catholics. And you had a bishop in Michigan who said only men can have their feet washed. Who's right in this? I mean, the Pope, we tend to see the Pope as a uniting figure within our own Catholic community, which is what he is. So that's a direct answer to your question. That's going to be a struggle that's going to go on for a while as things change. Yes? Oh, we get you then. Yes.
Yeah, do you also think that maybe as Catholics learning more about apologetics, they know how to answer other denominations, Christian denominations, saying things like, oh, you guys worship, you worship idols because you have statues and things like that. Learning how to respond to that might help kind of let Catholics come out and actually speak up for themselves and maybe evangelize more?
I think the common language we use is the language of Jesus. I mean, some evangelicals are not going to say that my experience of Jesus is somehow less than because I happen to be Roman Catholic. That if I can say that I experienced the person of Jesus in these kinds of settings, then that's going to be the common ground. It's not going to be I'm defending you. It's like, you know what? I experienced the person of Jesus in this particular moment. I experienced a life-changing moment as by the grace of Jesus. Being able to tap on that experience, it's what's going to build that bridge and make the common ground. So it's no longer this polemic between you. It's like, you know what? We're followers of Jesus Christ, pure and simple. And if you want to argue about stuff, go argue about stuff. As far as I'm concerned, it's about Jesus Christ crucified and risen.
Well, my question was too because sometimes they'll say, do you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? And a
I
lot
do.
of Catholics
Yes,
don't,
we do.
right? But if you talk to the general public Catholic that only goes to Mass once a week or every 6 months, they don't know. They don't know the answer to that.
Because they haven't yet been asked to struggle with that question. They've not been asked from the pulpit to say, you know, have you experienced Jesus? Have you seen Jesus? Has he touched your heart? Has he saved your life? Has he gotten you out of stuff? They haven't been touched that way, or they haven't been able to be invited to look at things that way. Because once you're able to do that, and like I said, the tools are there. You know, the tools of reflection, the tools of the Spirit. I mean, those tools are there. So, yes.
Actually, I had kind of two separate comments. One, Father, was what we were talking about a moment ago regarding the bishops and some perhaps being in disagreement with the Pope. Well, it's nothing new, first off. It's been going on since the beginning of the church, and it's actually very healthy because that is the way the church resolves where its direction is. So I just kind of wanted to point that out. That it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, actually. I mean, we may not agree with one particular decision or not, but the whole concept of bishops disagreeing is the way the church operates and comes to consensus.
Vatican II is a direct result of that.
Yeah.
I mean, the Vatican II, the Council, if that were not, if bishops didn't have a sense of where the Spirit might flow in that direction, this wouldn't have, we'd all be in Latin still.
Right. And could I make one more comment on what was just said too about the evangelizing toward Protestants or non-Catholics? You know, the best way we do that is we simply live our faith. We show people our faith, and we show people the encounter with Christ that we have. I just served the English weekend, Corsia weekend, just this last weekend, and we had a number of non-Catholics on the weekend. We have one of our rollistas, you know, shared, I just became Catholic at the Easter Vigil. There's 3 or 4 people serving. They all came and became Catholics because they came to Corsia as non-Catholics. They saw Catholics live out their faith, and now they're Catholic. But nobody preached to them. I mean, nobody said you got to become. Yes, we do preach on the Corsia weekend and tell what is the truth of the Catholic faith, but we don't say, you know, you have to become Catholic. But, you know, you have to do this or you have to do that, but they see the beauty of the faith and they come to it.
Well, you know the old Francis adage, right? You've heard the old Francis adage. What's the old Francis? St. Francis of Assisi, what he said?
Oh, yeah.
Preach always,
use words occasionally when you need it or something like that, yeah.
Yes.
You know, I mean, as you can see, we have so much struggle as adults in those things. I mean, we are lucky here that we have CEO, we have them. You know, my concerns are always the young ones. They're always the young ones and those things. It's just, I am grateful for the live stream program because at least now there is a mass that is lively, good music and everything else. And I see children, whether they are there for the first time because it's the song or whatnot, but they keep on coming back and they become more excited. Let's go to mass and celebrate the mass because it is for them. We need to find a way to capture and get a lot younger. I mean, I'm a catechist myself, and I switched from teaching kids, adults, and you know, I'm an RCIA catechist now, and it's just that capturing them. I'm blessed with my kids. Somehow they remain until they're 21, but I see children that they get communion, they disappear. And then, you know, and then that's the big gap, you know, why even the adults, why they could not say, Jesus is my Savior? It's because they stopped, that they let the fire. I love it that one mass that I attended, I think it's my son's confirmation. Bishop Mike Barber, he had a story about the fire. You know, the farther away you are, the deeper your fire is, and eventually it will come out. So we need to find a way to reach out to those people. Our church is pretty good, and we have small Christian community class programs. We reach out to the parents of those people that are in RCIA. We need more of that so that people that are kind of like, no, I'm not sure about Jesus being my Savior. We need to reach out to those.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I would agree with you, Life Team is a real success in those parishes that have embraced it. Not every priest is adept to working in a Life Team situation. last parish I came out of, we had a life team program and a monthly liturgy for kids. And not all the priests who served in that parish were comfortable with the life team. I was because I'm crazy. And I work with teenage kids at St. Mary's High School in Berkeley and St. Liz High School in Oakland. So I'm used to working with kids. But yeah, it's not always a, you know, you'd hate to, it's unfortunate that you have to end up relying on priests for that kind of thing. But it's no less a challenge for everyone else to witness in a good sense to our teenagers and be present to them. So. Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank Father Jayson for the excellent presentation that touched each and every one of us. I think from now on we will be able to see Jesus Christ everywhere.
I hope so.
Everywhere we go.
By the grace of God. I hope.
Okay, why don't we take a 5-minute break while we're setting up for Sister Sheila's presentation.